I'm Dr. Glenn Krieger, and like most of you watching this video, I'm also a clinical practicing dentist. Before we go into the clinical realm, there are a few pieces of equipment we need to talk about. The first is the camera. This is an SLR camera. As you can see, SLR and non-SLR cameras, otherwise known as point-and-shoot cameras, look very different, although some point-and-shoot cameras can have bigger lenses to try and mimic an SLR. The distinguishing characteristic between the two cameras is that one can remove the lens and replace it from a variety of other lens choices. Technically, the biggest difference is that an SLR camera allows the photographer to see through the lens so that the image previewed is the same as what will appear when the shutter is depressed. This makes composing an image much easier. Additionally, SLR cameras usually have more sophisticated lenses, flash systems, and shooting options such as aperture and flash adjustments, all of which can make the difference between a fair image and a spectacular image. Although this video shows the clinical use of an SLR camera, the tools, retraction techniques, and patient positioning suggestions can be adapted for use with virtually any type of camera system. The primary difference, however, is that any discussions related to f-stop or flash settings cannot be adapted to point-and-shoot types of cameras. Ultimately, it's up to each clinician to decide which type of camera suits their particular needs and applications best, and then seek appropriate training using that equipment. One word of caution, however, I've been approached literally on dozens of occasions by dentists who made the mistake of buying a complete dental camera setup based solely on the recommendation of a friend or a colleague. Could you imagine buying any piece of dental equipment without ever having used it or tried it just because somebody else said it was the right one to buy? This is something that I don't recommend. I can't stress strongly enough how much it will save you in terms of time, money, and frustration if you consider attending a hands-on clinical photography workshop prior to choosing a camera setup. By doing so, you'll have the opportunity to try a camera and figure out which one suits you best rather than relying on somebody else's advice without knowing exactly what it is you want. In this video, we'll be demonstrating the use of an SLR camera. In this particular case, it will be a Nikon D200. It's equipped with a wireless flash system called the R1 flash system. It's also equipped with a matching Nikon 105mm lens. This standard lens used in the dental industry, regardless of the type of camera brand, should always be a 100 or 105mm lens. We also need to make sure that the lens is always a macro lens. This means that it is a lens specifically designed to shoot images from a very close distance without any problems keeping it in focus. Anything else may not work well for the type of images and shooting distances used in our profession. Next, we're going to discuss retractors. The retractor is often viewed as the least important part of the process, while in my opinion, it's actually more important than the camera choice. You see, you don't want to put tension on any part of the lips that would pull another part of the lip where we need it to capture an image. Ever have trouble capturing a nice maxillary arch image because you couldn't get the patient open wide enough? I'll bet that while you were trying to capture that image, you were also retracting some part of the lower lip, thereby putting tension where you didn't need it. That's why I use plastic retractors, which I have modified myself in order to give me the best chance of getting every image every time. Don't worry though, I've created a complete set of retractors available for purchase through our website so that you can see how big of a difference the right retractors make in getting a great image every time. Last but not least are the mirrors. There are different types of mirrors on the market, but I prefer to use rhodium-coated glass mirrors. Rhodium-coated mirrors have been the gold standard used by the leading clinicians for many years. There are those in the field touting mirrors of greater brightness, but in my opinion, the shape and size of the mirror plays a far greater role than the brightness. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but once again, I've developed my own set of custom mirrors available through our website based upon my hands-on experience while teaching thousands of dentists. I've seen how many of the previous mirror designs actually made it more difficult to capture great images and designed my mirror set to overcome those problems. Additionally, many of the current shapes of mirrors are rarely used, so I made all of my lateral mirrors symmetrical in terms of shape and size. That way, Each mirror is actually 4 of the same usable ends per mirror, and I made my occlusal mirrors longer so that they are easier to grip while keeping fingers out of the picture. All of the mirrors and retractors that you see in this video are available for purchase through our website at www.betterdentalimages.com. The techniques that you will learn in this video will help you capture great images quicker and easier than ever before. However, such as when taking a front shot of an entire arch. The downsides to SLR cameras are their cost, weight, and girth. Unfortunately, there's nothing one can do to get around the weight and size of these cameras. However, in my experience as a teacher, once a student sees what these cameras truly are capable of doing, the weight and size are something they get around. There are a number of SLR cameras that have reduced weight and size, and I wouldn't dismiss an SLR setup solely because of its size. If it's a concern for you, I'd suggest you try picking one up and taking some images with it for more than just a minute or two. I think you'll find that over time, you'll be able to get used to the size of it. Many students who come to my courses with their point-and-shoot cameras, within a few minutes of holding an SLR, find that the point-and-shoot simply does not meet their needs compared to the flexibility and, believe it or not, ease of use of a digital SLR. I like to tell people that the difference between a digital SLR and a point-and-shoot is something like an automatic and manual transmission. Automatic transmissions make all the decisions for you once you step on the accelerator. However, if you're driving in difficult conditions or want more control over your engine, learning to drive a stick shift will be a little bit tough at first, but ultimately will give you a tremendous reward. The decision as to which camera is right for your practice, a point-and-shoot or an SLR, is solely up to you. There are many cameras on the market today that will fit the bill, whether you go to a point-and-shoot or an SLR camera. As far as point-and-shoot cameras go, there's not much to discuss. Most of them have some sort of fixed body with a lens that's attached, so you can't change it, and discussing lenses really is not significant for these types of cameras. Additionally, since almost none of them feature a macro function, they almost all have some form of attachment that allows you to get up close and capture an image in focus. The flashes are not readily controlled in terms of strength, so you're limited to the onboard flash system of the particular point-and-shoot camera, and as such, there's no need to discuss flash systems when it comes to point-and-shoot cameras. As you'll see later in this DVD, in order to control the lighting of a picture, we need to take control of the functions of the flash and the camera settings in order to be able to match the conditions that we're shooting in. If we take away this ability, predictability decreases tremendously, as there are situations where the camera simply can't figure out exactly what it is we're trying to do. With SLR cameras, there's a great deal of discussion we need to have about which camera is right for you. Currently on the market, there are 2 primary systems that own market share. They're Canon and Nikon. Here are a few things that you need to keep in mind when deciding which camera system is right for your practice. Size of the camera, ease of use of the flash system, the ability to review information quickly on the back of the camera, the size of the screen, and the quality of the screen, as well as the quality of the lenses, customer support, and price. When looking for an SLR camera, it's important to compare the different features of each. Because SLR packages come with different features, it's important for you to decide what type of price range you're looking to be in. It's my personal opinion that many dentists go out looking for the latest and greatest when there are some really great cameras for a whole lot less money that can do exactly what a more expensive camera can do. Remember, these cameras weren't designed specifically for dental use, so there are a lot of features on them that we as dentists will never use. For instance, there's never going to be a time when you're going to need a 10 frames per second camera for dental use. So why pay for that feature? Also, you're hopefully never going to be shooting images of teeth in a pitch black room. So why pay for a camera that costs what it does because of its ability to get great shots in dark venues such as concerts? Buy what works for you, and don't spend more just because the camera model is the next one up in the brand's hierarchy. There are 2 types of cameras that we're generally going to look at: prosumer and professional. As their name implies, prosumer cameras are better than what we see a typical tourist carrying. However, most professionals would buy something with a few more features. For professionals, where lots of features are important because of varying shooting conditions or tougher lighting, they'll typically look for something in the professional range. We, as dentists, can do great by looking in the prosumer range, where camera bodies alone, that's without the flash or the lens, will typically cost somewhere between $500 and $2,500. For both Canon and Nikon, there are several choices within each range. What's going to distinguish each is the package of features that you're looking for and the amount of money you're looking to spend. For instance, if your eyesight is going and you need to see things a little better, I would consider a model with a larger screen that has better resolution. If cost is the primary consideration, then perhaps a smaller viewfinder will work just fine. All prosumer SLRs will have the necessary settings to capture great images, so don't worry about that. However, as you'll learn later on this DVD, the histogram is one of the most important features of any digital camera, and the way you're able to view the histogram is somewhat different when you compare Canon and Nikon cameras. Another consideration when looking at camera bodies is the size and weight. You'll notice when looking at different cameras that their shapes can have subtle differences that make one slightly different from another. It's here that bigger isn't necessarily better. You need to find a camera that fits your hands. If you have smaller hands, you might want to consider a camera that might be too small for someone with larger hands. That said though, most people can adapt to almost any camera over time. My main reason for mentioning the size of cameras is because if two systems seem to be perfect for you and everything else is equal, size may be a consideration. With today's prosumer SLR cameras, resolution isn't really a concern in choosing one camera over another. Camera manufacturers would love to have you believe that the resolution of every single new camera is something you'll need. However, it's rare to find a camera made in the last 5 years that won't do what we need. Here's why. Let's discuss what resolution really means. Every digital image is made up of little squares of color called pixels. The amount of squares across the screen multiplied by the amount of squares down the screen is what makes up resolution. So, if a monitor is 1600 pixels wide by 1200 pixels down, that would mean that the screen has a resolution of 1600 by 1200 for a total of 1.92 million or 1.92 megapixels. So, if most of the best monitors on the market today have a maximum resolution of about 2 to 2.5 megapixels, does it really matter if your camera has 8 megapixels or 12 megapixels? Not really, except for two very simple examples. If you have to crop an image, something that isn't usually necessary if you use reasonable techniques to capture an image, and if you blow up an image to a very large size for printing. In the case of printing, one needs a lot of pixels, but even in that case, there are software programs that can make a lot out of almost nothing. What I am saying is that most cameras that we would call prosumer cameras made in the last 5 years or so have more than good enough resolution to do what we need them to do. In short, don't let the resolution of a camera drive your choice of what camera you should buy. Battery life also isn't too much of a problem when choosing a camera. Most cameras today have a pretty good battery life, more than good enough to function in a dental environment on a day-to-day basis. So we covered screen size, size of the camera, resolution, and battery life. What else do we need to consider when buying a camera? Well, we have to remember that lenses are proprietary, meaning that they aren't interchangeable between brands. A Nikon lens will not fit on a Canon body and vice versa. So once we choose a camera body, we're sort of married to the rest of the components that we buy, namely the lens and flash system. So let's discuss lenses. I'm not going to get into the optics of lenses because it can be very confusing, and frankly, most dentists aren't really interested in it. However, for the sake of our discussion, let me say that lenses in the 100 or 105 millimeter size are the standard for dental photography. Using other size lenses can create issues with being able to get what we need clinically. One thing, however, that every lens for dental photography must possess is macro capability. What that means is that it will allow us to get up close and in focus, sometimes from less than 6 inches from the subject. The f-stop or aperture of the lens generally will not play a role in which lens we choose, because a very low f-stop isn't something that we, as dentists, are ever going to use. Most lens manufacturers, such as Nikon or Canon, don't offer a ton of choices. So if you're looking for a Nikon 105mm macro lens, you get one choice. Now, it's my personal preference to spend a little more and buy Nikon or Canon lenses rather than other manufacturers who make lenses that happen to fit Nikon or Canon bodies. My reasoning for this is simple. If I have a Nikon body and Nikon lens and my images aren't working out for me, I can have Nikon clear the issue up without the ambiguity of perhaps the camera body manufacturer blaming the lens manufacturer or vice versa. I can't objectively support the belief of most professional photographers that one should always put Nikon glass on a Nikon camera, but that approach is one that I have always taken. So we've talked about bodies and lenses. Let's discuss flash systems. Today, there are two very different types of flash systems available, wired and wireless. As of the making of this DVD, the only manufacturer to have a wireless macro flash system for dental photography is Nikon. I have to say that switching from my old wired system to the newer wireless system was a bit of a paradigm shift, but once I learned how to properly use it, I couldn't imagine going back to my old tethered system. Later in this DVD, I'll show you how I set it up so that using it for dentistry is as easy as any other flash system out there. Now, although I love the Nikon R1 flash system, which is meant to go on a variety of Nikon cameras, there are a number of other wired flash systems that are fine for dental cameras. What I would suggest as minimal requirements for flash systems, regardless of whether they are wired or wireless, are the following. The flashes should be what we call point flashes rather than ringed flashes, and they should have the ability to be individually controlled, meaning that the operator has the ability to turn each one on or off independently. As you may have learned on my Exquisite Dental Photography Made Easy DVD, there are several times where being able to only use one flash can really make a decent image into a spectacular one. Ring flashes deliver the light from all the way around the flash in a ring. Although this gives very even lighting, it tends to remove the shadows, which means that we tend to lose a lot of color and surface texture, things that are important to us in dentistry, particularly in communicating with labs. The flash system should have the ability to be easily switched between a number of power settings ranging from full power, otherwise known as M or 1:1, all the way down to perhaps 1/16 or even 1/32. These different power settings allow you to vary the amount of light you're going to throw onto the subject, which, as you will learn later on this DVD, is critical for ideal image capture. What's important to remember is that most flash systems can easily be changed between camera systems, and there are some pretty good options offered from third-party vendors. Just because you shoot a Canon doesn't mean that you need a Canon flash system. So that's the basics for what one should look at when buying a camera system. Of course, there are a number of very knowledgeable dental camera companies that can help you choose the system that's right for you. I just think that it's really good for you to have some idea of what you're looking for when you buy a camera. Can you name any other piece of dental equipment that we buy without really knowing anything about it? Unfortunately, as I travel the country lecturing on clinical photography and digital case presentation, I've literally had hundreds of dentists who bought cameras prior to learning how to use them, only to find that the system they bought didn't really fit them well once they learned how to properly use the camera. That's why you should learn what makes each camera system different, learn the pros and cons of each, and play around with a number of different systems before settling on the one you'll be putting into your practice. Once you've purchased your system, you'll need to know how to properly set it up. That's what we'll cover next. While my goal here is to help you properly set up your camera, it's important to keep in mind that there are so many different types of cameras out there that it would be impossible for me to walk each and every one of you through your particular camera. That's why I'd suggest, before moving on, you should consider getting your owner's manual for your camera and flash system. That way, as I cover certain types of settings, you'll be able to pause the DVD and look at your manual to determine the exact steps required for your particular camera and flash. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to visit our website at www.betterDentalImages.com and send us an email. We'll always do our best to help you. The first thing that we want to set is the ISO setting on your camera. ISO is a term that refers to the camera sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the number, the greater the sensitivity. An ISO of 100 or 200 is generally used for outdoor photography on a sunny day or indoor up-close photography with a flash. Generally, anything above 400 is considered appropriate for indoor photography without a flash, with the highest numbers being used in extremely dark environments. Because we're going to be shooting indoors with flash photography, ISO 200 will generally work best for us. So, set your ISO to 200. The next setting that we want to adjust on our camera is the picture type and size. Generally, there are only 3 types of settings that we can have on modern SLR cameras: RAW, TIFF, and JPEG, with most of the more recent cameras being limited to only JPEG or RAW. TIFF and JPEG are 2 different types of compression formats. That means that both formats will compress the original image down automatically into a workable, smaller file. There is a difference between TIFF and JPEG, in that JPEG will give you an even smaller file with less information, but still completely workable for most applications. The major difference between a TIFF and a JPEG is that a TIFF leaves you with a much larger image with more ability to manipulate things. Although every time you open a JPEG image, change it in any way, and then save it, it will compress it again, making it even smaller. Years ago, when my camera gave me the option for TIFF, I used to choose it. The cameras that I shoot today either give me the RAW or JPEG options, in which case I choose JPEG on its largest image size for my everyday shooting. That's what I suggest that you choose. Last but not least, I would suggest that you shoot your camera on aperture priority setting. This means that you will choose the aperture or f-stop, and the rest of the settings will be taken care of by your camera. You should easily find this setting in your owner's manual. In my last DVD, Exquisite Dental Photography Made Easy, I spent most of my time telling you how to get great composition out of your images. In other words, how to get images that contain what you want. No shadows, no lips, cheeks, or retractors, using simple, easy to implement techniques. But even if you use all of those tricks, your images won't look good unless you have great lighting. That's what I'm going to cover next. I promise that if you follow what I'm going to show you in this section, your images will always be lit perfectly. It's simple and easy to replicate. But before you can truly understand it, there are a number of concepts that you must first learn. Before we get into tonal control, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the different ways we can shoot a digital SLR camera. Now, you may recall that earlier I said the difference between an SLR and a point-and-shoot is akin to the difference between a manual and automatic transmission. A manual transmission, like a digital SLR, has a lot of choices to make. It's harder to learn, but in the end, gives you considerably more control over what you're doing. If you've ever shot your SLR on the setting called TTL, or through the lens, you may have found that sometimes your images are too dark, or too light, or even perhaps out of focus. That's because a lot of times, your camera's metering system simply doesn't know what to do with the image. You see, the image of teeth, pink and white, from less than a foot away, is actually an extreme image for a camera's metering system. It simply doesn't know what to do with it sometimes. So when we shoot TTL and turn over all control of our metering to our camera, sometimes it'll give us an image that's too light or too dark because it's doing the best it can. It simply doesn't know what we want. That's why I'm a strong advocate of taking control of our camera settings, our f-stops, our flash settings, so that every single time we will have